Hi everyone, let's talk about explicit teaching and why it's not technically a thing. So, explicit teaching is simply being focused or deliberate about teaching a concept or skill to your class. So, breaking things down into chunks, manageable chunks, teaching that manageable chunk to everyone in the class before and making sure they know it before they leave the room, like explicitly going for gold. They've got to know this point. Right. How has this been lost? Because to me, it's just effective teaching. It's just teaching. It's just doing the job. How is it that this has become some newfangled pedagogy or bandied about as though it is? I have a few theories. Here we go. So, first of all, I think teachers' colleges are trying to cram in so much stuff to their programs that they're losing sight of the forest for the trees because that emphasis is not on that chunking, teach that point, move on, chunking, so that keeping it simple is always best, in my opinion. I think in schools, teachers have got so bogged down in administrative tasks and all the pastoral tasks and things that there is less time for actually planning, chunking things down. So scaffolding, creating a resource, making some notes, or just thinking about, okay, how are we going to do this for the next couple of lessons? There's so little time for that constructive planning. I think also there has been such a push to engage reluctant learners, form relationships, and so on, that we've tried to become performing seals and make every lesson engaging and amazing and so fun that actually the kids aren't learning anything. You can Kahoot yourself to death. They're not going to learn anything from it. So I think it's all about keeping it simple. So in this next section, let's go over what is explicit teaching. What I'm about to explain about what explicit teaching is, or should I say what effective teaching is a very regimented explanation. Okay, so just bear that in mind. Don't go, shooting the messenger and saying, yeah, but there's so much more you could do. Yes, I know. I'm just keeping it simple. I believe it's about 4 key points and the little offshoots of those. So I'm just going to move over to the side here because I'm going to put up on the screen exactly what a little graphic that you will be able to access in my blog. So the first thing is about having an end point in mind. So for example, you've just done your novel study with your students and you want them all to be able to write a literary essay. So that's your end point. Tick, number 1. The second thing you want to do is break that end point up into manageable chunks. So how am I going to get my students, drag them through kicking and screaming, pulling teeth, to the point where they can every single one of them can put a decent essay together. Now, yes, you can differentiate. Some will be chucking in the critical thinking, others will be just keeping it simple, whatever. We're not talking about differentiation at this point. So breaking it down into manageable chunks is about scaffolding, and you teach those chunks in sequence, in a logical order that build on from each other. The best thing you can do at this point is to do that activity yourself first. So you've got to write an essay. And I know it's a hideous thought, isn't it? I hate doing that. Or say, if you are asking your students to write a creative piece, you start one off. You don't have to finish it and edit it and have it as some masterful thing, but just go through the beginnings of that experience. Now, why should you do these things yourself first? Because you've got to empathize with your students. You learn what steps they need to do first. So, for example, with your essay, you're mucking around, and you're planning away, and you write your essay, and then you realize that actually the evidence that you used in paragraph One is the evidence that you need for paragraph 3. Oh, so maybe when you're doing your planning, you should plan not just your key points, but the evidence you're going to use for each of those key points as well. Must remember to tell my students this. So that's why doing it yourself first prevents a whole lot of problems later on. So break it down into chunks based on your experience. Think of little tricks of the trade based on your experience. Know what your students are going to struggle with, stress out about, because you've been there. Okay, so that's about empathizing. So your scaffolding, you do it yourself and you can empathize and you can teach better later on. Now, you take one of those chunks and it might be how to write an introduction to your essay, and you make sure that your students know that in this lesson or in the next 2 lessons, they are learning how to write an introduction for an essay. So this is the old clear learning objectives, right? Easy peasy, stick it on the board, whatever. The next thing that you need to do is think about the sequence of your lessons. Now, I like an age-old ESOL strategy, steps in these lessons, but also when we all went through the Te Kotahitanga PD years ago, one of the things they asked us to do was do these steps too. Now, what are those steps? Okay, here they are. First, the teacher does it or explains the point. And for me, that means writing notes on the board and some examples and discussing those notes, and then the students copy them into their books. Okay, so it's the teacher first, and then the students have a go in pairs or in small groups, and then the third step is they have a go on their own. If you have a look at the blog, I've got a table where it gives you 3 chunks, and I take you through the process about how I would do those things. Okay, so why are the students writing these notes in their books? So that they have something to show for their learning. So they can hold up that 1B5, that notebook, and say, this is what I've learned this year. Without it, they've got nothing. So if you've got a student that says, oh, yeah, we've got an exam at the end of the year, and you're like, right, where's your notes? What are you studying from? Oh, I think there's some things on Google Classroom. Cool. Or the other thing is that, if they're having to write out their notes themselves, they're engaging and they're learning more. And the key thing for me is what I love doing is I love saying, hey, well, remember we learned about this a couple of lessons ago. Just flick back and have a look. Oh, yeah. When I'm talking to a student, it's gold. Those books become a tool. They are your key tool. So get the students back to books, get them handwriting, get them managing their resources, managing their notes, and it will make such a difference. So the point is, the fourth part is teacher, peers, working on their own. I forgot to tell you. The other thing is, when the students are working on their books, you can use this mantra. Is it neat, complete, sweet? And by sweet, I mean like correct or pretty well done, as much as they can do, So remember that mantra. Is it neat, complete, sweet? Because you're not leaving the room until it is. And obviously you're going to make it manageable. And you might expect some things from some students and a bit less from others, a bit more from others. Okay, so that's part of your differentiation. But it's got to be neat, complete, and sweet. All right, let's talk about a few other extra little things that we need to have working in the background. Okay, I'm back in the middle. Right, so what else needs to be working in the background here to ensure that you are teaching effectively and you're able to work through those 4 steps easily, effectively. Well, one of the key things, and I catch myself with this time and time again, if students don't get something, if students can't do something, if students are useless at something, that's your problem. So I've caught myself going into resource rooms before, in whatever school I'm in, and going, no, the students are useless, and I give up. And well, I told them that last week, this useless, you know how you get in those modes. And then there'll be an epiphany, and I'll think, actually, this is my problem. And as soon as I remember that mantra, that this is my problem, I go, okay, so how am I going to fix it? How am I going to explain this a different way? How am I going to maybe just put my foot down and say, no, you know what, kids, we are going to do this, and you are going to finish it. So have that little attitudinal check maybe going in the background. The other thing is routine. Classroom routines make everything easier. Remember to keep it simple. Keep things simple. Don't try and be the performing seal. Planning doesn't have to be flash. I will write down on a scrap piece of paper my scaffolding, chunking that task down into bits, putting it into chunks. I will just scribble that on a piece of paper. If anyone ever asks me my planning, and if jobs were secured on that, I would have been fired 15 times a day. So scribble it on a piece of paper. Then when you get to, you've got your chunks, so you've got your introduction to an essay, how to write an introduction. You'll be able to do the teacher, the peers, the individual thing off the top of your head. I mean, think it through, obviously, and then wander into class. You don't have to note everything down. Having said that, there is a lesson planner in our freebies library if you wanted to access that. But really, who's going to write down a lesson plan for every period? I know we're supposed to, but it's kind of impossible. So you have those stages in your lesson. The teacher, the peers, or small groups, the individual work is in your head at that stage because you know that chunk that you're teaching. The 1B5s, they have to be cared for. They are a treasure, a taonga. They are a tool, and they are kept in class in a box. And don't say, oh, yeah, they just threw them in the box. Well, that's on you. I'm probably going to get annihilated with comments after this, but really it's like, no, those books need to be nice and tidy, and we're not leaving until they are in the box nice and tidy. And the same thing with the students' notes. Hey, you've written the date and you've just made a big mess of it, and you've started halfway through your book, whatever. No, do it again. Underline it, red pen, ruler. No, do it again, red pen, ruler. And it's that you only have to be a nag for a week or two at the beginning of the year to get that message across, that this is how it's going to be. And yes, there are always your outliers, I get that. But really, there is a way to manage those books. And of course, you've got to be marking those books. So what is marking? Marking is just checking. It's doing little ticks, even crosses or dots. It's writing a little explanation. It's circling where they need to correct things. It's putting stickers in. All the things. Even your year 12s, 13s, whatever. They love a good sticker. Everybody loves stickers. It's about marking in class. So you're wandering around and you're marking as students are working, and that saves time later on, right? And the other little trick that I've talked about before is sticker ahead. When the students get to the sticker, and there might be 4 students per class that will get to the sticker, they hand their book in, and then you mark up to that sticker, and you put a new sticker in 3 or 4 pages ahead, and they work until they get to the next sticker. So that's a good way of managing it. That's all in the blog as well. What is ineffective teaching? We've looked at what explicit, i.e. effective teaching is. What is ineffective teaching then? Ineffective teaching is about playing the performing seal. It's about bringing in the flash techie things. It's about thinking you've got to be the most fun teacher on the planet and do group work all the time and creative stuff all the time and yada, 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 and cahoots and God knows what. It's not about that. It's not about that at all. It's not about being entertaining. It's about teaching. So, and students need to understand they are there to learn. They have Netflix and TikTok for entertainment. Let's get school back to teaching and learning. Just saying, probably get annihilated for that, but never mind. Effective teaching is not about leaving things to chance. For example, I take a poem and I spend half the period or the period even discussing that poem with my students. So I've put it up on the whiteboard or the screen, or I've given them a copy and we just discuss it. That's not teaching them how to annotate a poem. That's not teaching them how to look at vocabulary, look at the steps to analysis, the vocabulary, the figurative meanings, the context of that poem, and connecting with our own world. So they need to know those steps. So that's explicitly teaching them how to analyze and respond to a poem, because they need to be able to do that themselves when they go into an exam next month. Okay, so that's leaving things to chance if I simply discuss the poem. Another one is if you have finished your novel study and you get students to write an essay. Righto, kids, we're going to write an essay. Remember, it's got an introduction, 3 body paragraphs, and a conclusion. That is not explicit teaching. That's leaving it to chance. And then you probably end up having a heart attack when you get these rubbish essays in at the end, right? The other thing is that explicit teaching, effective teaching, is not about getting students on Google Classroom and just finishing activities all the time. They're just doing activities. That's consolidation, just as a group work is consolidation. Playing a bit of Kahoot maybe is consolidation. So their activities are consolidation. They are not taking in those concepts, recording those concepts, those skills, so that they can look back later on and see how to do those things, or so that they can look back later on and memorize those things. So just don't be consolidating all the time if the teaching hasn't been done before that. Okay, shock horror. I'm actually going to stop talking now, but I'm going to tell you, if you want to see some examples of how you can break your lessons into the teacher, peer, small group, on their own sequence, have a look at the blog. I've got a table there and I take you through 3 different chunks, so you can see what the teacher could do, what the students could do in pairs or groups, and what they can do on their own. So those chunks include how to write an essay introduction, how to use possessive apostrophes, and taking students through the political setting of a novel study. So have a look at that. Hopefully you appreciate what I'm trying to say here and about effective teaching, and how explicit teaching is simply effective teaching. It is good teaching. Don't go thinking that explicit teaching is some new pedagogy, some amazing new strategy. It's not. It's about getting back to basics and not being the performing seal. So anyway, if you want the deets, have a look at the blog and enjoy your teaching. It's fantastic.